World champion! Read 'em and weep, you guys!
If your childhood was anything like mine, then on Saturday nights you were probably watching Toonami. For the uninitiated, Toonami is Cartoon Network's programming block dedicated entirely to showcasing dope anime. The broadcast originally aired from 1997 to 2008, then returned in 2012 and is still going strong. The block brought us classics like Dragon Ball Z, Mobile Suit Gundam, and the Big O. But the one Toonami anime that stuck with me the longest is without a doubt Yu Yu Hakusho. The show follows the journey of one Yusuke Urameshi, a troubled teen who becomes spirit detective after sacrificing himself to save a young child. There's so many reasons I love this anime. The music is catchy as hell, the fight scenes still hold up despite being nearly 30 years old, and did I mention the variety of icy outfits? But I think the one element that elevates Yu Yu Hakusho above all other animes for me is the fact that at its core, it's really a story about growing up. If you know anything about writing fiction, then you know that a story is only as interesting as its antagonist. And man, does this show step up to the plate when it comes to bad guys. But what's so special to me is that each saga and each main villain are emblematic of a stage in Yusuke's development. With each challenge, Yusuke takes another step towards not only becoming more powerful, but becoming a better version of himself. Since this is a story about growing up, I thought it'd be interesting to use some cognitive development theory as a lens for understanding and appreciating the material. Don't sweat if you don't have a degree in child psychology, because our good old pal Jean Piaget broke this whole process of mental maturation down into 4 easy steps. 1. Sensorimotor stage. The learner builds an understanding of themselves and their reality by interacting with their environment. 2. Preoperational stage. The learner is gaining some traction, but needs more experience before they're fully operational. 3. Concrete operation stage. As the learner gains more experience, they begin to think and perform more abstractly. 4. Formal operations. The learner is fully operational and no longer requires additional experience in order to make informed decisions. Just a disclaimer, this is an extremely simplified view of this whole developmental process, but there are some great resources online that I'll link below if you're interested in learning more. As I previously mentioned, the show is conveniently broken up into 4 sagas, and each one corresponds to Piaget's framework surprisingly well. We could view the Spirit Detective saga as Yusuke entering the sensorimotor stage. It's during this time that he's introduced to the concepts of spirit world and demon world. He learns about his special ability, and he has his first few run-ins with demons. One thing about this first saga is that, unlike the following seasons, it lacks a central villain. The conflict is a little one-dimensional, as we kinda just follow Yusuke on a bunch of fetch quests. However, this period is pivotal in illustrating the rules of the world and establishing the conflict that will come later. It's during this first mission that Yusuke meets Hiei and Kurama, demon thieves that will eventually work alongside the Spirit Detective. One thing to note about Piaget's process of development. In his view, learning is all about creating patterns of thought from physical experiences, i.e., the more we experience, the better we get at predicting the outcomes of new situations. These thought patterns are referred to as schemata. There are 2 ways we create schemata for ourselves: assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation is when we experience something that fits into our pattern of thought. Accommodation is when we experience something that defies that pattern and causes us to adapt our thinking. One could make the argument that Hiei and Kurama are somewhat representative of these 2 different processes. Hiei is a hot-headed swordsman who's willing to cut his enemies down, no questions asked. Kurama, on the other hand, is more cunning and less straightforward when it comes to conflict. Even looking at their first encounters with Yusuke, we can see these ideas at play. The fight with Hiei is more of a typical good versus bad, save the day type situation, while the conflict with Kurama is a bit more complex, as his motivation for stealing this enchanted item is saving his mother. While Yusuke ends up besting Hiei in combat, he sympathizes with Kurama and actually assists him in carrying out his plan. With the addition of Yusuke's longtime nemesis turned spirit-sensitive sidekick, Kuwabara, the squad is officially complete. Towards the end of the Spirit Detective saga, Yusuke and the team are sent on a mission to rescue an ice spirit from a nefarious crime lord. It's here that we're finally introduced to the first main antagonist of the show, Toguro. Toguro and his gang have been hired by a crime lord to break Yukina the ice spirit, but they also act as a security detail once Yusuke and Ko arrive. After taking the gang out one by one, Yusuke and Kuwabara seemingly defeat the Toguro brothers while Hiei saves Yukina. However, not long after, we see Toguro is alive and was merely instructed to throw the fight. While Yusuke's victory was a superficial one, Toguro is nonetheless impressed by his strength and fighting prowess. Keeping Piaget's framework in mind, this saga could be considered Yusuke in the pre-operational stage. A while after the events of the first season, Toguro visits Yusuke, challenging him to take part in something called the Dark Tournament. If Yusuke refuses, then Toguro threatens to go after his friends and family. Left no choice, Yusuke spends the next few months training with his mentor Genkai. The dramatic question of this arc is a simple one: who is the strongest fighter? Though often throughout the tournament, this question is flipped on its head, as things are not always what they seem. Egocentrism, or the inability to think outside of your own perspective, is often associated with the pre-operational stage. Many times in this saga, Yusuke and the other contestants are betrayed by simple assumptions they make. As the tournament progresses, we soon learn that there are many different kinds of strength: mental, emotional, and even spiritual. Another quality of this stage is that the learner tends to only focus on one aspect of a problem. Yusuke becomes fixated on Togoro's physical strength and begins to doubt himself. This is where things get interesting. See, Toguro doesn't just want to rematch Yusuke, he wants to catch him at his full potential. Toguro has his own motivation for proving that he's the strongest. This man is haunted by a dark past. 50 years prior to his and Yusuke's encounter, Toguro was known as one of the strongest demon slayers in the land. But days before the Dark Tournament, every last one of his disciples was slain by a powerful entity. Blinded by anger, Toguro sets out to avenge his students, ultimately defeating the monster responsible, but becoming one in the process. After he wins, Toguro asks the tournament committee to make him a demon. The anime presents multiple explanations for why Toguro would do such a thing, but in the end, it's clear that his quest for power is driven by a fear of vulnerability and mortality. Yusuke and Toguro are bound together by their desire for strength. While this desire comes from something inherently positive, wanting to protect the people they love, Yusuke is shown what the relentless pursuit of power can lead to. Only after inheriting his mentor's spirit energy and witnessing what he believed to be the death of his friend, Yusuke defeats Toguro. Once in Spirit World, Toguro accepts his fate like a true badass, requesting to be sent to Limbo for 10,000 years. In his view, it's a fitting punishment for all the dark deeds he's done. But before he faces his damnation, Toguro leaves Genkai with some sage advice.
You have a job to do. Your apprentice, Urameshi, he can still be stronger, but he could go the wrong way too. Like me. Maybe he'll actually listen to you the way I could not.
Not only does this line add an ocean of complexity to Togoro's character, but it sets up the next stage of Yusuke's moral development. Ah, the Chapter Black saga. Consider the Dark Tournament checkers, and this arc a game of three-dimensional chess. Lest we forget, this is Yusuke in his concrete operations phase. One of the main characteristics of this stage is abstract thinking. If Toguro represented the fixation apparent in the pre-operational stage, then the villain of this saga, Sensui, represents the idea of decentration. But I'll break that down more in a bit. Yusuke will soon come to find that things are different this time round. His physical strength means nothing when going up against a new breed of psychics. Following the events of the tournament, normal humans begin to develop strange psychic powers, allowing them to influence individuals within a certain range. Not long after returning home, Yusuke is baited and kidnapped by 3 young men from a neighboring school. As the plot unfolds, it's revealed that this is all a ruse created by Genkai in order to prepare them for their next mission. She informs the crew that a band of psychics plan to open a tunnel to Demon World, which would mean the end of humanity as they know it. Their investigation leads them into a confrontation with Shinobu Sensui, who just so happened to be the previous spirit detective. Alright, just a fair warning here. Sensui is one of my favorite villains in all of anime, if not all of pop culture. Let me explain why. This guy is an insane strategist. He can beat ass like no other, and not to mention that fashion sense is fuego. But more than all those things, Sensui's complexity is enhanced by the fact that, in a twisted way, he's kind of justified in his mission. Like I said before, Sensui used to be a spirit detective just like Yusuke. He spent the majority of his adolescent life hunting and slaying demons, and he got good at it. But one fateful day, Sensui came across something that shattered his perspective. After tracking down the infamous Black Club, he discovered that rich and powerful humans were torturing demons for their own enjoyment. This revelation not only flipped Sensui's morality upside down, but caused him to snap and go into a murderous rage, killing every human in sight. The trauma from this incident also caused Sensui to develop multiple personality disorder. Upon being diagnosed with a terminal illness, Sensui and his partner, Itsuki, set out to bring an end to the human world before his time on Earth runs out. Remember that word I mentioned earlier, decentration? This is essentially a fancy term for the ability to concentrate on several aspects of a situation at the same time. In a messed up way, Sensui perfectly embodies this idea, and it's for this reason that he makes the perfect antagonist for Yusuke at this point in his development. He forces Yusuke to step outside of his singular perspective and view situations from all sides. In a poetic twist of fate, Yusuke is revealed to be part demon during their final battle. Yusuke taps into this newfound power to bring about Sensui's defeat. Before dying, Sensui explains his motivation for opening up a pathway to Demon World.
Because it's home. Home to the apparitions whom I've been taking life from since I was a child. But I was an adolescent and did not even think to question such simple binaries.
Ultimately, Sensui is grateful he could die by Yusuke's hand, since Yusuke represents the best of human and demon kind. This is a heavy moment for our hero, but ultimately one that pushes him into the final stage of his development. The fourth and final stage is characterized by logical thought, deductive reasoning, and systematic planning. All skills that Yusuke clearly lacked in the beginning, but has grown to develop over the course of the show. After learning of his demon heritage, our hero is left in a strange place. Though things should be back to normal, Yusuke's distant. He obsesses about the implications of his heritage and ultimately fears what he's capable of. In a sense, Yusuke is his own arch villain during this saga. During his search for answers, Yusuke is approached by a group of demon interlopers who try to convince him to return to Demon World. The visitors tell Yusuke the history of the Three Kings, three supremely powerful demons who have been locked in a deadly stalemate for the past 500 years. Yusuke is a descendant of one of these demons and heir to the throne. The interlopers explain that this stalemate is responsible for the relative freedom Demon World enjoys, but they fear that the balance of power is shifting since Yusuke's demon ancestor is dying. Yusuke agrees to return with him, if only to tell his demon dad to stick it where the sun don't shine. To further complicate matters, Hiei and Kurama are also heirs to their respective thrones. Though these warriors all have history together, they fear that this power shift means war for the Demon World, one that none of them will be able to stop. After another few months of intensive training, Ryzen dies and Yusuke takes his rightful place as king. But in an act of sheer rationality, Yusuke proposes another tournament as an alternative to a full-out war. At this point, Yusuke knows the value of life and the cost of bloodshed. In my opinion, this is Yusuke's final evolution, not into a depraved warrior king like he feared, but instead into a peaceful diplomat. He brought unity and balance to what could have been just another maelstrom of violence. Every punch Yusuke's ever thrown, every evil plot that he's foiled, it's all led him to this moment. There's a powerful scene towards the end of the saga that illustrates just how far Yusuke's come. While fighting Demon King Yomi, Yusuke realizes he's lost the will to fight. He's been fighting his whole life, but why? What's the point in perpetuating this conflict any longer? Then Yusuke is reminded, right now, he's just fighting to get back home to Keiko, the woman he loves. In the midst of all of this violence and conflict, Yusuke has not only found his identity, he's also learned what his true priorities are. I think that's a beautiful sentiment, and one that rings true even in real life. Though we may face certain challenges, the obstacles in our path help to shape us into what we're ultimately meant to be. If it weren't for the hard times, we would never know what we're truly capable of.
You might be giving yourself credit for. If you have something that's going on in your life right now,